Jim Harbaugh press conference today after his Big Ten imposed exile from Happy Valley on Saturday. Of course, he was in town watching the game from somewhere. He said his face was about 5 inches from the TV when Sharon Moore gave him the shout out at the end of the game. But this is the first time we've had a chance to hear from him since the Big Ten suspension came down on Friday and all of the drama with the court stuff. And is he going to coach? Is he not going to coach? And I got to say this, guys. Jim Harbaugh, some of his, I don't know if classic is the word, but some of his all-time press conferences have come in the weirdest, most awkward, ridiculous moments of his coaching tenure at Michigan. And for what my money's worth, today's may have been the one that took the cake. He was on fire.
Yeah, it was fun. And it was funny because he would have said, when I go out, I need a little bit of a break. I go feed the chickens or whatever. And I was the one that asked him. I said, wait a minute. After the question, do you really have chickens? And then he goes into the chicken speech. And that was fantastic. And he apologized to the chickens for calling them previously a nervous bird. And that's why he didn't eat chickens. And he said, I got to apologize to my chicken friends. And talked about teenage chickens. I thought it was fantastic. It was a lot of fun. And it was good to see him relax a little bit, man, because this guy's been under the gun, obviously. And, everybody framing, you've got some networks out there that are framing this like it's the biggest scandal in college football history. We've gone from, guys, 85 to 90% of teams, steal signs in some form to, oh my God, the children are going to get hurt, because people might know the signs in advance. They have proven now game after game after game that it is a minimal advantage, frankly, of, knowing somebody's signs in advance, which is probably what most people, if they were honest, would tell you. And some of the coaches out there are still saying it, but you got guys like Matt Rule, who can't beat Maryland at home, saying that, oh my God, the reason that we lost to Michigan is because they had our signs. Give me a break. It's an absolute joke. So here's hoping that he's on the sidelines for Maryland and Ohio State. I do think the networks really want to see him on the sidelines against Ryan Day and Ohio State. So I think that's something that is still a possibility. I think it's less likely now that in speaking to people that he's on the sidelines at Maryland. But Friday was a weird night, guys. Clay and I were out with our friend Bruce Cortade at State College, who was the former head of the Michigan State Bar, and we were waiting to hear. Michigan was optimistic. They were optimistic that they were going to get the TRO, and the lawyers that we talked to said, it really isn't supposed to be one of these things that gets kicked down the road. We had a couple of litigators tell us that have been around for 40, 50 years practicing law that this was bizarre, that, you're supposed to get a ruling or you're not, a yes or a no. They said they would have been able to live with the no, but to kick it down the road for a week, and it went from one judge to another who was on duty that night, back to the other judge, and then it gets kicked down the road and nobody really knows how. We'll have a story on that tomorrow, but just weird. So kudos to this Michigan team, guys, for the way they responded. You could tell Clay was on the field. Clay, tell us about how the team responded, because it certainly looked like it took the wind out of them early.
Yeah, so I was actually down there waiting by the bus because there were rumors that he was either on the bus or in a car circling the stadium ready to get the decision. Bruce Feldman tweeted, I think at like 10:20, that there was expected to be a decision, and then at 10:30, all the other announcements come down that there wasn't going to be, the judge wasn't going to do something by game time. And then, of course, the hearing, comes out that there'll be a hearing on Friday. But as that news started to kind of circulate, you could kind of see it on people's faces, and a lot of like kind of nods to each other of understanding, like, okay, we still got to get this done type of thing. We spoke to Donovan Edwards briefly on the field, and he's always smiling, but as he was smiling, he was saying mad face. And Jim Harbaugh told them on Friday night to play angry. He would never tell us that. But Sharon Moore revealed that after the game, and you could kind of see it. Just the emotion pre-game, in-game. J.J. McCarthy barking at Chop Robinson early on in the game. Kenneth Grant with, some huge celebrations after the plays he was making. The sideline erupting. Charles Woodson and Brandon Graham encouraging the guys. It was Michigan versus everybody, literally, except for the fantastic turnout they got from the road fans there, and the fans that were heckling Franklin after the game. But it was just a really cool experience to see that up close, obviously under some weird circumstances, but you're right. It was really impressive what this team did. And then my favorite moment from the presser today was what Anthony was talking about, Jim Harbaugh, hoarse voice, almost like his introductory press conference back December 30th, 2014. when he didn't have his voice, and he just decides he's not sick. He said he was told he has a virus, but he's not sick. And he had just got done with a workout, and he dropped the quote, "I am the iron wall that viruses bash against and shatter." So that's the jackhammer right there. I thought that was incredible. And that was one of many fantastic lines that he used on Monday afternoon. There's James Franklin.
Franklin with his, as Doug Skeen would say, our analyst, wearing his sunglasses on a cloudy day, just to let everybody know how cool he is. We're gonna give you a little bit of a break here too, Anthony, because and let you talk a little bit less at times. But I wanted to go to something that Account 22 said over here in the comments. TRO was blocked by an Ann Arbor lawyer. SMH no. And speaking to people at Michigan today and attorneys and people that are directly involved in this, they said the judges still could have made a decision. It had nothing, they said, okay, it had nothing to do with the Big Ten or a lawyer blocking it. They said it was still their option to make a decision here. And when I talked to the people at Michigan who were optimistic about it, they said, when I asked them about, when it didn't come down and then it got kicked the next week, and he said, absolutely wild was the response that I got. So certainly not something that they were expecting. So continue to shoot the messenger though, guys, when it comes to things that don't go your way. We'll take those bullets just like Jim Harbaugh takes the viruses. You know what? Hopefully they bounce off our chests. And but it's been fun covering this, Nat. We just want to cover this football team, fellas. And it was fun watching these guys in action on Saturday and listening to that crowd and listening to James Franklin getting booed in the tunnel after losing to a team without a coach was beautiful. And God bless Sharon Moore. Anybody who says, guys, that was, oh my God, they're playing the victim, that was emotion. You got guys coming after you, just absolutely beating the living hell out of you on social media and in the media in a coordinated attack. Let's call it like it is. And of course you're going to be emotional, man. And credit him. I love Sharon Moore for the emotion that he showed. And I know Jim Harbaugh did too.
We have a super chat here that just came in from our guy Go Blue 982, who said, am I a bad fan for wanting Jim's suspension to hold so I can laugh at my OSU friends for their team losing to a team run by a substitute teacher? That kind of lines up with where I wanted to go with how I feel about all this, is that if Saturday did anything for me personally, now make no mistake about it, I think that what the Big Ten did to Jim Harbaugh last week was, I think, so transparently, I'll use rotten as the word for it. I mean, and I'm sure, from their perspective, it's, we just want to make sure that Michigan maybe gets a dose of how these other teams felt having to change their stuff up super quick. I mean, here's my thing, is that Saturday for me reaffirmed that I don't care about any of this. And that as long as this team just goes out there and handles its business, Jim Harbaugh or not, they're the best team in the Big Ten because they have the best players in the Big Ten at multiple positions. They have the best assistant coaching staff in the Big Ten. And ultimately, when you look at, and I'm not arguing that Jim Harbaugh shouldn't be there, it's going to be really interesting. And that's where I'll ask you next, Chris, where we think this goes this week. But if anything, I mean, that's what's turned this ship around for Michigan under Jim Harbaugh, is they have elite coaches, they have elite players, and they just have this don't give an F. They've seen everything type of attitude. And I know there's a lot of low hanging fruit takes in terms of, oh, well, this is the first coach ever that's been suspended twice in a year. Well, in a weird roundabout kind of way, the team is prepared for that now too. So it just kind of feels like we'll see what happens if this team gets through this regular season undefeated and gets to the playoff. But in the here and now, I mean, they still, to me, far and away look like the best team in the Big Ten. But Chris, I did want to ask you, now that this is where we're at, what does the rest of this week look like?
Yeah, first things first, the low-hanging fruit thing that we've determined on Friday night that was Clay's new nickname, low-hanging fruit. This is between the Cortades and us. So
thanks
thanks for being here, low-hanging fruit. But anyway, it's a great question.
I had nothing to do with that reference, by the way.
That's all us. Anyway, here's the thing. Do I think they're as confident as they were on Friday? Absolutely not, because this came out of left field and they certainly didn't expect it. And so now in front of a judge who everybody's like, well, he's not going to be reelected. Well, he wasn't going to be up for reelection anyway. And the way we understand it, and again, we don't know if it was which judge determined this or if it was a collaboration that, okay, we can't come to a decision, so we need to push this to next Friday. But so I don't think there's that confidence. And there are rumblings out there that Fox definitely wants to see Jim Harbaugh on the field against Ohio State. So with the NCAA at Central Michigan, Anthony Broom's alma mater, this week, and in fact, we were talking to people, and I wrote a column about this today, that some guys were being grilled up there today, fellas. They really want to know if that was Connor Stallions on the field, and is that because they want a little more ammunition for the Big Ten against Michigan on Friday? And everybody says, well, it doesn't matter because, what does it have to do with Harbaugh? Well, the NCAA has said, this is about Michigan. This isn't about Harbaugh. And the best way to punish Michigan overall is to punish Harbaugh. So they're looking for any evidence that they can get, right?
Which is ridiculous, by the way.
It is. And if it does come out that, hey, that was Connor Stallions, and they can come back out on Friday and say, look, this is another thing they did, that we've proven that they did, type of thing. Even though we specifically, we have a story on this ready to go. Connor Stallions was not there in a capacity for Michigan, no matter what any rival might say. So we will talk about that in another podcast down the road. But so will there be some more negotiating? And I was talking about this on the Huge Show with Bill Simonson today, and he said, man, you can't back down now. He said, you're in this too far. And if you do that, then it sets a precedent here where you go to the NCAA and you don't have as good a case because you said, okay, you're agreeing that, okay, we'll let our coach, one more time. Whereas just a week ago, Michigan people were telling us that they weren't going to back down, even if they got a steely-eyed glare from the Big Ten. But so there are a few different ways this thing can go in the next few days, guys. I'll be honest, knowing what I've heard about the judge in charge of this, I would not be extremely confident if it went to Friday. And there is also talk that it could be moved to a different court. So we'll have more on that tomorrow when we in a column in the morning. So join us at thewolverine.com.
I think it might be better for their chances, maybe if it gets moved to a different court or federal court or whatever.
Right.
Based on talking to other lawyers as well. I mean, I think I've said it, but I mean, I may go get a law degree over the next couple of years here so we can cover college football these days with everything that's going on between NIL and this. But no, it's crazy. I definitely don't feel as confident going into Friday because the Big Ten's also going to be there to be able to state their case. And maybe Fox tells them to back down. Yeah. It doesn't seem like at this point Tony Petitti is going to back down based on him handing that suspension in the disrespectful way he did, where Jim Harbaugh found out because someone reached their phone in front of his face and showed him with the social media post. They didn't have the courtesy to call Ward Manuel or Jim Harbaugh directly. You would think they'd call Ward Manuel. So that's a slap in the face. To me, it feels like the Big Ten's going to try to state their case. And as Chris, we talked about on the way home yesterday, Michigan winning without its head coach and the Big Ten allowing him to coach throughout the week could be main, points that they're trying to make on Friday, saying this is not irreparable harm, which is one of the points that Michigan is trying to raise in its case with the court, submitting 219 pages of documents that I'm not going to read. So that's, it definitely feels like there's less of a chance, and there's a lot riding on Friday, even if there's an appeal, because Friday will only be 8 days out from the Ohio State game. And yeah, as the commenter said, maybe it'd be more satisfying, and probably not even though, but to win without a head coach over Ryan Day. But it's going to be way harder to do that without Jim Harbaugh. So you want all hands on deck. You want the, probably the best coach in the country, in my opinion, on the field, on your side. And that's just what, common sense would say. Give him due process, let the process play out. And, you would hope that that's how the court rules. Yeah. And Ferris Khan, good question here. Why does he leak to the media first? How does that help him? Because he's got mouthpieces out there, Ferris, that say, hey, if you do this, do us a solid, we'll scratch your back right back. Right. And what an embarrassment. What an embarrassment for this conference and for this commissioner, who some people, I think it was Brett McMurphy, had interviewed. He said industry source compared him to the Pac-12 commissioner. Yes. The Pac-12 has 2 teams left. He says, I don't think he meant that in a flattering way. This guy's a clown. I'm sorry. You know what? And he's placing these articles out there, having people write these puff pieces, his PR firm saying, ooh, Tony Petitti is strong. He knows what he's doing. This guy's just so far in over his head. Here you are treating your cash cow this way. Could you imagine the SEC treating one of its teams this way over sign stealing? And with all due respect, again, to anybody who thinks this is the biggest scandal in the history of the Big Ten, Jerry Sandusky, do we need to go down the list any further than that? That's the only thing that we need to say. No, right? Your argument's done right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. What an absolute embarrassment for Tony Petitti to say that. Man, come on.
He doesn't know the Big Ten well enough to even know that.
He's an MLB TV guy who, by the way, in speaking to a lot of people, said he was terrible at that job too, and nobody could stand him there from some of the sources that I've talked to. So anyway.
Big Ten's botched 2 hires in a row.
Yeah, they sure have. What Kevin Warren sitting there and avoiding every tough question by talking about the people he hired doesn't do it for you, Clay?
No, not particularly.
No, me neither.